Welcome back. The next few videos are going to help bring everything we've discussed so far together in a way that not only explains how we've been programmed, but how we can reprogram our belief system for the life we truly want. And so it's a good idea to rehash the most important points we've covered so far so these items don't get lost in the new information coming your way. Okay, so first thing, your team consists of 3 players: your active mind, your subconscious mind, and your body. And the most powerful player on your team is your subconscious mind. If you're not making headway on your goals and dreams, it means your mental team is in a state of competition and not cooperation. Your job is to convince your subconscious mind to cooperate with your active mind. Now, the arena in which this game is played is known as reality, and a powerful rule dictated by the game board's invisible referee is that your mental programming and your reality must balance. If your programming says you're overweight or poor, your reality must balance with that. Your reality equals your programming. So to change your reality, you must change your programming. The goal of this game is to experience a life of more, the life you truly want. Now, you get to decide which category of more you want as your reality, but you must first and always keep your team alive. That is rule number 1. If you don't, the game is over. The opponent you are playing against is a ticking clock whose time is running down to 0. And for better or worse, you have no idea how much time is left in your game. Therefore, time is not only your opponent, but your most precious resource. So those are the basics we've covered so far. And now is the perfect time to introduce the last member of your team, your physical body. I think it goes without saying that the human body is incredible. The way it moves about the planet and the way that it interacts with other life forms is truly astonishing. Your body is literally the vehicle you use to move you about the game board. But your body is also weak. It's extremely vulnerable to rule number 1. At the most basic level, what your body needs most to comply with rule number 1 is energy. And this energy is provided by food, oxygen, and water. Now let's say this circle represents the total daily intake of calories an average human consumes. Approximately 60 to 65% of this fuel is needed just to stay alive, not doing anything, not using this energy for fun or recreation, just a state of rest, baseline survival. This is known as our basal metabolic rate. More than half our energy is required simply to remain alive and to stay in the game. This other portion is used for everything else, to work, exercise, go grocery shopping, play with your kids, eat food, clean the house, play piano, etc. If your goals and dreams require any activity other than just sitting and breathing, it will require energy from this portion to bring about that success. Now you may be thinking, no problem. I have plenty of extra calories. I've been carrying around my hips, stomach, and thighs for the past few years. I have surplus energy stored all over my body. But understand, this circumstance is extremely rare. Excess food is a modern blessing. For 99% of our history, humans have been mostly hungry, with periods of starvation always looming around the corner. A constant shortage of calories was the norm, and this normality was a constant threat to rule number 1. So you can imagine that over that long 99% of human history, some very specific programming needed to take place to deal with this situation. Your ancestors relied on deep survival code to maintain an unbroken chain of life and reproduction, over and over hundreds of thousands of years, leading up to you sitting here today. And that code is still inside you. And that code basically says that conserving energy is a brilliant strategy to accomplish rule number 1. Conserve energy, don't waste it. Conserving energy is also a deep programming strategy that likely is even older and therefore more powerful than our strategy of acquiring more. Well, how much more powerful? Well, it may help to visualize what I'm suggesting. This rectangle represents 1 year. Here is a decade. This represents 1,000 years. This is the age of Jesus. This is the speculative age for the pyramids. Now, those who study this stuff place the beginning of Homo sapiens around 300,000 years ago. This is where our earliest fathers and mothers started their survival programming. A lot of time transpired before we arrived at the Neolithic Revolution, which is when traditional hunter-gatherers started to learn to farm. Farming and livestock first appeared about 12,000 years ago. Now, this is most likely the start of us having consistent food. And I say the start because we didn't really figure this agricultural thing out until the 18th century, during the British Agricultural Revolution. Even though humans knew how to farm, our knowledge and techniques weren't that successful. Things really started to take off here, when farming began producing enough to feed the modern world. Humans have been around for approximately 300,000 years. We've only enjoyed sufficient calorie intake for about the last 300. And that's a whopping 0.1% of our history. And even if the acquisition of more strategy began here, that would only represent 4% of Homo sapiens' time span. Conservation of energy enjoys this seniority over that modern strategy. So if I had to bet on which of these two strategies has more influence over our lives, I'm banking on this one. Understanding this now gives us two powerful strategies deeply programmed into all humans to accomplish rule number one. Acquiring more is the most successful survival strategy, but for nearly all of human history, the opportunity for that strategy was very limited. For the vast majority of our ancient ancestors, hunger and starvation loomed over their entire life. And that reality, the game board they were dealing with, resulted in two dominant strategies basically controlling the whole of their lives: conserving energy while also trying to acquire more. So, how do these ancient survival strategies affect your goals and dreams? Well, it has to do with understanding the underlying programs that are controlling your life. As said at the onset of this course, if you're playing a game you don't even realize you're playing, it's going to be very hard to win. And on top of that, if your most dominant strategies are default strategies and they were programmed primarily for survival over any other outcome, then you need to be aware those are in play so you can expand and work beyond them. Now, do you remember this moment from Module 3? Between you and your goals and dreams, there are an untold number of actions and behaviors you will have to undertake to make them your reality. If you think about it, conserving energy is always easier than working, struggling, or battling for more. It therefore tends to become the default setting for humans once we have our food, shelter, and clothing needs met. Between your current reality and the reality you want, you have various actions and behaviors that must take place to bring that reality into existence. So why aren't you doing them? Why aren't you working late on these goals? Why aren't you turning off the TV or getting up early on the weekends? It's because your subconscious mind automatically favors the strategy of working less, attempting less, conserve those calories. As long as you're fed, warm, and safe, your subconscious programming would rather you sit on the couch and watch TV than exercise. It prefers you spend hours on social media just tapping with your fingers rather than working on some project that will advance your dreams. You see, from the perspective of your subconscious mind, you are winning because you're alive. Rule number one: this is your deepest programming, keeping the status quo, keeping you just as you are right now. It thinks, why change? Now, the other player on your mental team, your active mind, is the part that craves your goals and dreams. For it, staying the same is failure. It wants change. The status quo isn't working. It needs some form of more. And that, my friends, is the first programming conflict between your active mind and subconscious mind. That is where these two arm wrestle in competition and not cooperation. If you change your reality, and particularly if you do this rather quickly, your subconscious gets very uncomfortable. And it makes sense why. It's unsure what lurks in this new, unexplored reality that your active mind is blindly leading you into. Your subconscious mind becomes less confident in your survival because it's never experienced that reality. It's never processed it. It doesn't yet have the programming to feel certain it can deal with what might happen. This new reality is a dark path into an uncharted forest. Why go there? If your subconscious can keep you where you are in your current reality, it's highly certain you'll at least stay safe. Yes, bored as hell, maybe depressed, but definitely fed, clothed, and protected from the elements. You're safe. Which leads us to a third wildly successful strategy safeguarding rule number 1. Your third deep programming strategy controlling your life is minimize risk. Now, I'm pretty sure you understand this concept, so I'm not going to carry on about it, but understand that this strategy also predates accumulating more as a survival strategy, which would suggest that between the two, it also is going to be more influential. So here they are, the 3 dominating strategies operating deep within your programming and affecting nearly everything you do in life. Accumulate more, the most successful strategy. Conserve energy, the easiest strategy. And minimize risk, the safest strategy. If we can accumulate more, conserve energy, and minimize risk all at the same time, we have the trifecta of survival strategies. We are golden. But what happens when you can't have all 3? Which do you prioritize? Consider this scenario. What if you were starving to the point that if you didn't get some food, you would surely die? Like game over. This means conserving energy, just laying around, is no longer a viable strategy. You can't lay around. You have to get up and find some food. And what happened if when you went out searching for food, you discovered a small apple orchard just filled with lots of apples? Acquisition of more is right in front of you. Go collect as many of those apples as you can. But as luck would have it, a pride of lions also lay sleeping on the outskirts of this apple orchard. So what now? Which strategy do you employ? Do you choose history's most successful strategy or history's safest strategy? There's no simple answer. The scenario is filled with uncertainty. The mind will heavily weigh both strategies and eventually choose one. It'll either risk going for the apples or it's going to turn away and forage elsewhere. Now, I'm going to admit that was a pretty loaded example. You got lions and starvation, life or death. You know, it's easy to see how those survival strategies obviously get triggered in that situation. But this is the game that is happening in your current reality as well. It's the game you didn't know was taking place. You didn't know you were playing this. The negotiations taking place inside your mind among these 3 strategies applies to so many of your decisions. You know, should you talk to that stranger? Should you confront your boss about a well-deserved raise? Should you pursue another career path? Or should you move to another city? Or should you get off the couch and go jogging? Conserve energy, acquire more, minimize risk. Your deep programming code only wants to protect you. So here's something else to consider. Our survival code considers any form of failure or any form of rejection potentially risky to our life. Now, why is that? Well, we've been programmed to be social creatures, right? Because that was a very successful survival strategy as well. And we couldn't survive without at least one person taking care of us for the first few years of life. So for nearly all of history, to be rejected by our family or tribe would have resulted in us being alone in the wilderness, which most likely would have resulted in our death. And that is why any behaviors that might potentially result in rejection or failure are so threatening and resisted by our subconscious mind. It's not just physical survival we're programmed for. We are also programmed for social psychological survival. A better word would be self-preservation. Rule number 1 is about both. Rejection and ridicule threaten rule number 1. And pursuing your goals and dreams may result in failure, and failure may result in rejection and or ridicule from society. That's why trying to shift your reality is so risky to your subconscious mind. It literally interprets the endeavor as threatening to rule number 1. We can understand intellectually in our active minds that business failure doesn't equal death. But our programming has a default setting for any failure and or rejection. And here's an example, in a modern business setting. Almost everyone, including seasoned salespeople, hate making cold calls. Now, if you're not familiar with the term, a cold call is calling someone, typically a stranger who isn't expecting your phone call, to try and sell them something. And the vast majority of these attempts result in abject failure. I mean, lots of rejection. And it triggers a subconscious program that says, minimize risk. Avoid that behavior going forward, which in this case is merely making phone calls. Now, hardly anyone truly realizes that the reason that they hate cold calling is because their deep programming feels it threatens rule number 1. And so we attribute other reasons for hating it. Other beliefs like, I don't like to bother people, or I'm not good at sales, or it's too hard to succeed, or nobody wants the product or service. But the truth is your deepest survival programming has been triggered. Your job is to modify your programming so your goals and dreams and the activities needed to achieve them no longer trigger either of these 2 strategies. If you understand how the game is played on default mode, meaning how these 3 subconscious strategies dominate and control your life, it's going to be much easier to reprogram around them. That's what this course is ultimately about. Now, hopefully the game is starting to reveal itself much clearer now. Here's what I want you to take away from this lesson. First, if you aren't living the life you want, you can bet at least one of these strategies is blocking your success. 2, changing your reality may provide more to your life, but it will also require an unknown expenditure of energy to attain and maintain that. That triggers conservation of energy. Now, on top of that, this future reality provides uncertainty in itself, which introduces risk, which is now 2 against 1 in favor of you staying exactly where you are. And finally, in understanding how Rule 1 affects your success, please don't think your life literally has to be at risk for your subconscious mind to sabotage your goals and dreams. Rule number 1 is about self-preservation, which also means your social, psychological existence. Rule number 1 protects your ego, as well as your placement within your family, community, or the society in general. Now, in the next video, I'm going to introduce what we can do to start unblocking our success. But before you jump to that, make sure you complete the assignment found below in this video in the module contents. The self-awareness you're going to get from this assignment will be helpful when we start working on your belief system. Now, at this point, we have a pretty good idea what you're up against. We know the obstacles in this game, and we just have one more obstacle to deal with. And that is understanding your own unique belief system. And we're going to start tackling that next. I'll see you again in the next video.